All right, see if you can guess who I'm thinking of. Guy who spent decades peddling vaccine conspiracies, cozying up to anti-vaxxers, and tweeting wild claims about autism and Wi-Fi, who recently swam in a creek full of human waste, with his grandkids, no less, is now calling the shots on America's health policy, whose first official report didn't so much plagiarize sources as it made them up. Yes, that's right. I'm talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our Health and Human Services Secretary. And he just yanked $500 million from mRNA vaccine research. Why? Well, because he says it's risky and ineffective. Meanwhile, the scientists who actually saved millions of lives during COVID are screaming, "What in the actual are you talking about?" So let's talk about RFK Jr.'s latest anti-science stunt, why it's dangerous, and why letting politicians play scientist is a bit like letting a toddler drive a Tesla. So hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of Back Porch Files, a weekly bonus episode from your neighbor on the left, the podcast about liberal politics, human decency, and life on the blue side of America's ideological divide. My name is Don Spielis, your opinionated host. So our topic for today, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the official black sheep of the Kennedy dynasty, who's now the head of Health and Human Services, because apparently qualifications are optional in 2025, as we've discussed at length. This week, RFK Jr. decided to play mad scientist and axed $500 million in funding for mRNA vaccine research. That's right. The tech that saved millions during the COVID pandemic, he's tossing it out like last week's kale salad. Why? Because he thinks it's risky and it doesn't work. Spoiler alert, the real scientists disagree vehemently. Today, I want to unpack RFK's reasoning, or lack thereof, why the scientific community is losing its collective mind, and what other life-saving treatments might get screwed over, and why letting politicians like RFK make scientific decisions is like handing a chimp a chemistry set. So grab your coffee or whatever you have, your rage, or maybe both, and let's dive in. Alright, so let's start with the basics. On August 5th, 2025, RFK, our esteemed Health and Human Services Secretary, appointed because, I guess, Trump thought name recognition equals medical expertise, announced that the Department of HHS is pulling the plug on 22 mRNA vaccine projects. That's $500 million in research, folks. Gone faster than my patience at a school board meeting. These projects, funded through BARDA, that's the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority, for those keeping score, were aimed at tackling viruses like COVID, flu, H5N1 bird flu. You know, the stuff that could spark the next pandemic. So, what is RFK's reasoning? In a statement that sounds like it was scribbled on a napkin at an anti-vax rally, he claimed mRNA vaccines, quote, fail to protect effectively against upper respiratory infections like COVID and the flu, end quote. He goes on to say that he reviewed the science and listened to the experts before deciding to shift funding to, quote, safer, broader vaccine platforms, end quote, like whole virus vaccines. Oh, and he posted video on X, because where else do you announce major health policy? Saying mRNA is troubled and collapses when viruses mutate. So let's pause here for a small reality check. RFK Jr., a lawyer with a history of publishing debunked vaccine autism links and claiming Wi-Fi causes cancer, is now telling us he's the arbiter of scientific truth. This is the guy who once said vaccines are a holocaust. His words, not mine. And now he's reviewing science. I'm sorry, but that's like me deciding I'm qualified to perform brain surgery because I watched a YouTube tutorial. And here's the kicker. RFK's claim that mRNA vaccines don't work against respiratory infections is, to put it politely, a steaming pile of nonsense. He's cherry-picking one aspect, upper respiratory infections, while ignoring that mRNA vaccines were never designed to stop every sniffle. They're built to prevent severe disease, hospitalization, and death. And guess what? They did. A 2021 analysis by Airfinity estimated that the Pfizer-BioNTech mRNA vaccine alone saved nearly 6 million lives in its first year. Moderna's another 1.7. ICU admissions dropped to near zero for vaccinated folks. Long COVID risk cut by about 50%. But RFK says they fail. Sure, Bobby, and my old flip phone was a failure because it didn't have TikTok. His whole viruses mutate argument, that's not unique to mRNA vaccines. It's true for all vaccines. The difference, mRNA tech can be updated in weeks to target new variants, unlike traditional vaccines that take months. Yet RFK wants to ditch this for the whole virus vaccines, which haven't been used for things like whooping cough since the 90s because they caused fevers and seizures. Progress, meet reverse. And let's talk about his view of the science. What science? The studies you cherry-picked from anti-vax blogs? The experts you listen to, were they the same ones who think 5G causes migraines? Because the real scientific community is apoplectic. And we're getting to that next. Now look, I'm not saying that RFK is evil. I'm saying he's dangerously unqualified. This isn't about a guy with a medical degree weighing evidence. It's about a conspiracy theorist with a megaphone and a government job. And it's a problem. So anyway, getting back to what does the actual scientific world think of RFK Jr.'s little stunt, let's just put it this way. They're not sending him fruit baskets. Experts across the board, from infectious disease specialists to Nobel Prize winners, are calling this decision reckless. An anti-science disaster. Let's break it down. Dr. Paul Offit, a vaccine expert at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, who, by the way, invented the rotavirus vaccine. So he's not exactly Googling what's a vaccine. He called RFK's move unscientific and dangerous. He pointed out that mRNA vaccines saved millions of lives during COVID by preventing severe disease and death, even if they didn't stop every cough. Offit says this cut could leave the U.S. behind the 8 ball for the next pandemic. Then there's Dr. Mike Osterholm, a University of Minnesota infectious disease guru with 50 years in the game. He called this the most dangerous decision in public health he's ever seen. Why? Because mRNA's speed is unmatched. Traditional vaccines take 18 months to produce enough doses for a quarter of the world's population. mRNA, 6 to 8 weeks for a new vaccine. Millions of doses shortly after. That's why it was a game changer for COVID. Dr. Rick Bright, who ran BARDA during the first Trump administration, put it bluntly. He said, dismantling mRNA is like disbanding the fire department because the fire's out. He says it's a huge strategic misstep that weakens our defense against future pandemics, natural or bioterror-driven. Even Dr. Peter Hotez, a pediatrician and vaccine developer, warned this move pushes a pseudoscience agenda that undermines national biosecurity. So I think it's pretty clear that RFK's decision sort of screws over pandemic preparedness. But it's not just about COVID or flu. mRNA tech isn't a one-trick pony. It's being explored for a slew of life-changing treatments, and RFK's funding cut could kneecap those too. So let's talk about some other things that are at stake. First of all, cancer. mRNA technology is showing insane promise for the personalized cancer vaccine. A 2024 study in Nature found that an mRNA vaccine reduced the risk of pancreatic cancer returning after surgery. Pancreatic cancer has a 5-year survival rate of just 13%. mRNA could be a game changer. Researchers are also testing mRNA for breast cancer, melanoma, and other nasty types of tumors. Even billionaire Larry Ellison praised mRNA's potential for cancer at a White House event. Then there's HIV. Early studies suggest mRNA vaccines paired with anti-cancer drugs could boost anti-tumor responses and maybe even protect against HIV transmission. Genetic diseases? Yep. mRNA's on that too. Scientists are working on inhaled mRNA therapy for cystic fibrosis, which could help kids breathe easier. Sickle cell anemia is another target. But RFK's $500 million cut, targeting 22 different projects with companies like Pfizer, Moderna, and Emory University, could stall or kill all of these efforts. One company, Teva Biotech, was working on a non-mRNA therapeutic for swine flu, but got caught in the crossfire. Their project was nearly done, and now it's toast. This isn't precision surgery, it's a sledgehammer to innovation. RFK's anti-mRNA crusade could have a chilling effect beyond these 22 projects. Biotech companies might hesitate to invest in mRNA if the government can just yank funding on a whim. As Dorit Rice, a vaccine law expert, put it, why invest in new tech if the government can cancel promised contracts? That's how you stifle progress and scare off the next big breakthrough. Look, I get it. RFK thinks he's protecting people, but when you're gutting research that could save lives from cancer, HIV, or genetic diseases, all because you've got a personal beef with mRNA, you're not a hero. You're a roadblock. And that brings us to the bigger issue. Why in the heck is a politician making these calls in the first place? And this is the part that's really infuriating. Science isn't supposed to be a political football. It's supposed to be driven by evidence, peer review, and, actual scientists. But RFK's funding cuts shows what happens when politicians with zero qualifications start playing gatekeeper to research. Not to sound repetitive, but RFK Jr. is not a doctor, he's not a virologist, or even a guy who took a high school biology class seriously. He's a lawyer with the famous last name and a history of spreading misinformation. Yet, he's deciding which technologies get funded and which get trashed. That's not just bad policy, it's dangerous. Science thrives on rigor, not ideology. When the government picks winners and losers based on political agendas, you get disasters like this. If the government had been in charge of researching polio, we would have the world's most expensive iron lung. Take BARDA, the agency that RFK's cutting. It's designed to find cutting-edge research to protect us from biological threats, pandemics, bioterrorism, you name it. Career scientists at BARDA opposed pulling Moderna's bird flu vaccine funding earlier this year, calling it a political move. They didn't fight hard because they knew the Trump administration was anti-mRNA. That's not science, it's bullying. And it's not just RFK. The Trump administration's track record pushing hydroxychloroquine, playing down COVID shows a pattern of politicians overriding experts. When you let ideology drive research, you end up with Lysenkoism, that Soviet-era nonsense where politics dictated biology and crops failed. RFK's cuts could leave us unprepared for the next pandemic, whether it's bird flu or something we haven't even seen yet. As Dr. Jake Scott, an infectious disease doc, said, "I saw patients die before mRNA vaccines. Post-vaccine were night and day." This isn't about trusting the science blindly. It's about trusting the process. Scientists debate, test, refine. Politicians like RFK, they grandstand. And when they control the purse strings, we all pay the price. All right, so let me wrap this up. RFK Jr.'s decision to cut $500 million from mRNA vaccine research isn't just a bad call. It's reckless, anti-science, a power trip from a guy who's as qualified to run HHS as I am to fly a spaceship. His claim that mRNA vaccines are ineffective has been debunked by mountains of data and millions of lives saved. His push for safer alternatives, a throwback to outdated tech that could leave us vulnerable. And the collateral damage cancer treatments, HIV vaccines, and therapies for genetic diseases could all take a hit. And worst of all, this shows what happens when politicians play scientist. Science needs to be left to the experts, people with PhDs, not grudges. RFK's not just wrong, he's a walking argument for why government should stay out of the lab. And I end so many of these conversations with what can we do? And the answer is very similar. Call out the nonsense, share the facts, bug your reps to restore the funding, and maybe, just maybe, demand that our healthcare leaders have actual credentials. Okay, so that brings this episode to a close. Thank you again for listening to this supplemental Back Porch Files episode of Your Neighbor on the Left. As always, I want to tell you that I'm anxious to hear from any of you. You can use our social media platforms to reach out to us. The links to those are all on the Linktree page, and the Linktree address is in the episode description. You can also contact us via email. That address is neighboroutleftpodcast@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you, whether it's compliments, complaints, questions, suggestions, whatever. So we'll be back on Tuesday with another full episode, and until then, stay vigilant, stay healthy, stay smart, and as always, have the week you voted for.